Chapter 9. I was hurting people while trying to be loved. I used others the way I thought love was supposed to feel. It's easy to talk about the people who hurt you. It's harder to talk about the people you hurt. By the time I sat down to write this chapter, I'd already told you about the betrayals, the heartbreaks, the abandonment. I'd painted myself as the wounded one, and I was. But I also know that if this book is going to be real, then I can't stop there. I have to tell you about the times I became the storm I was trying to escape. And this is the truth that made my hands tremble over the keyboard. While I was desperately trying to be loved, I was also breaking people who didn't deserve to be broken. I wish I could tell you I saw it clearly back then, but I didn't. I wasn't cruel on purpose. I wasn't walking around thinking, how can I ruin this person today? I was just lost. And when you're lost, you bump into people, you crash into them, you cling to them when you're drowning, not realizing you might be pulling them under too. It was late September, I remember, because the air had that early autumn bite to it. The kind that tells you summer is over, but winter hasn't arrived yet. She was standing outside the coffee shop, arms wrapped around herself, smiling like she was seeing someone she'd been waiting for all day. That someone was me. Her name isn't important here, but what she represented is. She was steady where I was chaotic. She was patient where I was restless. Her voice could have calmed storms, and sometimes I hated her for that. We fell into rhythm quickly, texts that bled into midnight, long drives with no destination, quiet moments where she'd look at me like I was something rare. And it scared me to death, because when someone sees you clearly, they see all of you. And all of me? Back then, I didn't want to be seen. So I did what I'd learned to do. Push, then pull. I'd vanish for 2 days without a word, then show up at her door acting like nothing happened. I'd accuse her of not caring if she didn't answer my call on the first ring, then tell her I loved her an hour later. I turned her kindness into a stress test she never signed up for. In recovery, I learned there's a reason. Some of us sabotage safe love. Safe love is predictable. It doesn't spike your adrenaline. It doesn't trigger the chaos your nervous system is addicted to. If you grew up in instability, safety can feel boring. Boring feels dangerous because it's unfamiliar. So unconsciously, you create drama, fights, jealousy, silent treatment, not because you enjoy it, but because it feels like home. That's what I was doing to her. I was dragging her into my home, except my home was made of broken glass. One night, she sat across from me in her tiny living room, a blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. I could tell she'd been crying, but her voice was steady. "You don't even realize you're hurting me," she said, "and I'm starting to wonder if you ever will." I wanted to say something, anything that would make her stay. But my pride walked in before my honesty could. "You're overreacting," I said. She didn't yell, she just nodded, looked down, and whispered, "Maybe." 2 weeks later, she was gone. Back then, I told myself she gave up, that she wasn't loyal enough. But now, I see it differently. She wasn't weak. She was tired. Tired of being my emotional punching bag. Tired of bleeding from wounds I never acknowledged. After she left, I did what I always did. I found someone else to fill the silence. Not because I was over her. Not because I was ready for someone new, but because being alone meant facing myself, and I wasn't ready for that kind of confrontation. He was one of the only people who never asked for anything in return. We'd been friends for years, the kind where you don't have to talk every day, but when you do, it feels like no time has passed. He'd check in, send a random meme at midnight, or just call to say, "Bro, you good?" The truth? I wasn't good. And instead of letting him see that, I started fading away. I stopped answering. I left his messages unread. I told myself I was too busy. But the truth was uglier. I didn't want anyone close enough to notice how bad I'd gotten. Weeks turned into months, and by the time I finally called, it was too late. He'd stopped trying. In therapy, I learned that ghosting isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's cowardice. When you're ashamed of who you are, it's easier to disappear than to be honest. You think you're sparing people from your darkness, but you're really just sparing yourself from being seen in it. The irony? By disappearing, you become the very source of hurt you were trying to avoid causing. There was a time I thought writing would fix it. When I couldn't say the words in person, I'd write letters, apologies, explanations, half confessions that danced around the full truth. I found a stack of them once while cleaning out an old backpack, unsent, all of them. I realized I hadn't been writing to heal anyone else. I'd been writing to soothe my own guilt, like putting ink on paper could erase the way I'd left things. Here's the thing about chasing love while broken. You're not chasing love, you're chasing relief. I was addicted to the first rush, the way someone's attention could make me forget my pain for a little while. I didn't care if it was real or healthy, I just needed the hit. And like any addiction, the crash came faster every time. I'd pull them close, drain them dry, then push them away when they wanted more than I could give. It wasn't malicious, but it was selfish, and selfishness wears people down until there's nothing left but resentment. One night, I sat in my car outside an old friend's house, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I thought about knocking, thought about explaining everything, thought about saying, "I'm sorry I disappeared. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't matter when you mattered so much." But I didn't. I drove away instead, because sometimes facing the people you've hurt feels harder than facing yourself. That night in the car was supposed to be the end of the story, another moment I buried and pretended never happened. But the universe has a way of circling back. And 2 months later, I found myself face to face with one of those ghosts I'd left behind. It was a grocery store of all places, fluorescent lights, cold air from the freezer section, a cart full of things I didn't really need. I turned the corner near the bread aisle, and there they were, one of the people I'd ghosted, one of the faces I'd avoided like it would burn me. For a second, I froze. Not the casual, "oh, hey, it's you" kind of freeze. My stomach just dropped through the floor kind. They saw me, and they didn't look away. It wasn't anger that hit me first. It was disappointment. That's the thing about disappointment. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It's quiet, but it cuts deeper than rage ever could. "Hey," they said, like they were testing the word in their mouth. I opened mine to speak, but nothing came out. The aisle felt too narrow, the air too thick. I forced a smile, the same mask I'd worn 1,000 times before. "How have you been?" I asked, like the past 3 years hadn't happened. "Really?" That's all you have to say. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was sharp enough to make me want to retreat into my old habits, deflect, joke, change the subject. But this time, something in me shifted. Maybe it was because I'd been trying to face myself in the mirror lately. Maybe it was because the guilt had been simmering too long. I was a coward, I said. I should have called. I just couldn't. They didn't soften right away. They didn't say it was okay. They didn't rush to make me feel better. And honestly, that was fair. I wasn't here to be absolved in a single-aisle conversation. I thought we were friends, they said, real friends. And then you just vanished. No explanation. Do you know what that feels like? I nodded, because I did. I'd had it done to me before, and somehow that made it worse. This is what I've learned. It's one thing to face yourself in the privacy of your bathroom mirror. It's another thing entirely to face yourself in the reflection of someone else's pain. That's the real test. And in that moment, I realized my healing wasn't just about me. It was about the trail I'd left behind, the people I'd cut with my sharp edges while pretending I was harmless. I didn't fix it right there. Some wounds take more than an apology in a bread aisle. But I stayed. I didn't look away. I didn't make excuses. I'm sorry, I said, not just for disappearing, for making you feel like you didn't matter when you did. They nodded slowly, and then, just enough to break me open, they said, I believe you. I thought that conversation would leave me feeling lighter. Instead, it left me with a question I couldn't shake. If I could hurt people I truly cared about while chasing love, what did that say about the kind of love I was chasing? That night, after the grocery store, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the conversation itself, but because of what it unlocked. I kept replaying it in my head, not their words, but the feeling, the tension in my chest, the guilt in my stomach, the strange cocktail of shame and longing. And then, like it always does when I can't sleep, my mind wandered back, way back, to places I usually avoid. I was maybe 8 or 9, old enough to notice the difference between being seen and being approved of. There was someone in my life, I won't name them here, whose love came in 2 versions. The warm, open, laughing version that made me feel like I mattered, and the cold, silent, distant version that made me feel invisible. The catch? That warm version only appeared when I was doing something right, getting good grades, staying out of trouble, being the good kid at family gatherings. Mess up even a little, and the warmth vanished. No yelling, no big fight, just absence. In my child mind, the math was simple. Love equals performance. If I wanted closeness, I had to earn it. If I wanted to be safe, I had to behave perfectly. If I wanted people to stay, I had to make myself easy to love, even if that meant hiding the parts of me that were messy, loud, needy, or hurting. I didn't realize it at the time, but that equation would follow me into every relationship I had. Friendships, romances, even professional ones. And here's the cruel twist. If love is something you believe you have to earn, then losing yourself in the process doesn't feel like a loss, it feels like the cost of admission. By the time I was grown, I didn't even notice I was doing it. I could walk into a room and instantly scan for what people needed me to be. Funny? I could be funny. Deep, I could be deep, unbothered. I could fake that too. And on the surface, people loved me for it. But underneath, it was exhausting because I wasn't actually loved, my performance was, which meant every connection felt fragile, conditional, like one wrong move could shatter it. Here's the brutal truth. When you're living in that performance mode, you don't know how to do real. Real means vulnerable. Real means letting people see the cracks. Real means saying, I'm not okay, without immediately apologizing for it. And when you don't know how to do real, you end up doing something else instead. Disappearing. It's easier to ghost than to risk being rejected for your unfiltered self. It's easier to push people away before they see the parts of you you've been taught are unlovable. It's easier to hurt them on your terms than wait for them to hurt you on theirs. That's why that grocery store conversation rattled me so much. It wasn't just about them. It was about the fact that every hurt I'd caused in adulthood had roots in the same soil I grew up in. I'd been hurting people for the same reason I'd been hurting myself. I didn't believe I could be loved without the mask. But here's the thing about roots. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. And what I did next wasn't graceful, wasn't perfect. But it was the first time in my life I decided to test whether I could be loved without earning it.